Why is he always leaving before his shift ends? CEO Victoria Hale's voice was icy, fixed on the security monitor. On the screen, the impoverished janitor meticulously checked every room, turned off lights, locked the doors, and drove off precisely at 8 p.m., even though his shift was paid until 10. "He's obviously skipping work," she stated, her tone sharp as broken glass. The next evening, she personally tracked his beat-up sedan, watching it stop in a dark, quiet suburb. Stepping out through the hospital's glass window, she saw him sitting next to a little girl with tubes, telling her a story in a raspy whisper. The girl managed a weak smile. "Daddy, you promised to finish the last chapter." The CEO choked up. The man she believed was irresponsible was simply racing time itself for his daughter. Ethan Cole, a man forged by fire and loss, was 40 years old and a single father. He wasn't always a janitor. Before the tragedy that defined his life, he had been a highly respected systems maintenance engineer, specializing in complex energy grids. His career had been solid, his future secure, built on a foundation of precision and unwavering dedication. He wasn't just fixing things, he was ensuring the safety and stability of massive infrastructure projects. 3 years ago, everything shattered. Ethan lost his wife, Clara, in a horrific industrial gas explosion. It happened when he rushed back into the collapsing plant to rescue several trapped workers. He managed to save 5 lives, a heroic act that was quickly forgotten by the public relations cycle. But in the chaos, his wife, a beloved community organizer who was delivering lunch to the team, was fatally injured. Ethan himself suffered severe shrapnel wounds and nerve damage, injuries that left him physically incapable of performing the high-precision, heavy-duty work his engineering role required. The tremor in his hands, though slight, ruled out any return to the delicate work of wiring and calibration. Stripped of his career and his anchor, he found himself lost, yet tethered to one fragile, non-negotiable mission: his 9-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily was a vibrant, imaginative child, but she was born with a complex congenital heart defect. Her life was a constant cycle of surgeries, medications, and extended hospital stays, each day a quiet, high-stakes gamble. To manage Lily's crippling medical bills and ensure he was available during her critical hours, Ethan took the graveyard janitorial shift at Hale Industries, the premier energy conglomerate run by the very successful Victoria Hale. The irony was a constant, bitter pill. He was now cleaning the floors of the type of company he used to build and protect. His new schedule was a punishing split. He worked from 12 a.m. to 8 p.m., a compressed schedule achieved through superhuman efficiency. Ethan was meticulous. He had an engineer's eye for detail, and he cleaned the vast, sterile office towers of Hale Industries with a silent intensity. He moved with a purpose that was almost military, ensuring every surface reflected his effort. He never missed a single stain, never left a surface dusty. Crucially, he would silently correct minor mechanical faults, a loose door hinge, a sputtering air vent, notifying the maintenance team by carefully written notes pinned to the problem areas, all while strictly staying in his janitorial role. He was fixing the company from the bottom up, without seeking credit. He accomplished all the work of a 10-hour shift in 8 hours. He had to. He had a silent, immovable deadline at 8:30 p.m. every night. Story time with Lily at St. Jude's Hospital. That reading session, that half hour of normalcy and love, was the only thing holding her spirits and his, together. His diligence earned him only scorn from his coworkers, who felt his speed created unrealistic standards. They saw his speed not as efficiency, but as showing them up. "You work that hard, but you don't get a bonus. What's the point?" A colleague scoffed once, shaking his head. Ethan simply smiled, his eyes distant. "I don't work for a bonus. I work for a promise, the kind of promise you can't break." Victoria Hale, 35, was the embodiment of corporate perfection. She was a CEO of unrelenting standards. She viewed Hale Industries not as a workplace, but as a hyper-optimized machine, and any deviation from policy was a sign of systemic failure. The spreadsheet was her gospel. When she noticed the nightly discrepancy in the janitor's clock-out report, 8 p.m. instead of 10 p.m., she was furious. She didn't check the quality of the work, which was flawless, She checked the protocol. If he's paid for the night shift, he stays for the full shift. No exceptions. We do not tolerate time theft, regardless of how clean the bathroom is, she announced during a department head meeting, her voice cutting through the tension. Ethan was called in by HR. He remained silent, meeting the HR manager's cold stare with tired eyes. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He simply nodded and promised to comply. He had learned the hard way that the powerful don't want to hear reasons. They want compliance. He knew his silent efficiency was enough, but rules were rules. The next evening, Victoria, fueled by corporate impatience and a strange, unacknowledged curiosity, came in person. She walked the immaculate floors, checking the rooms herself. She watched Ethan meticulously buff out a scuff mark she herself hadn't noticed. She saw his careful notes for the morning crew, detailed engineering-level observations on potential mechanical failures. He finished everything by 8 p.m., not a single chore left undone, and drove away. This led to the encounter in the Hook. Driven by an urgent need to verify her suspicions of deceit, she followed him. She followed the old, rattling car deep into the city's older, quieter districts until it finally pulled up in front of the formidable, sterile structure of St. Jude's Children's Hospital. She watched through the window as he entered Lily's room. He sat by her bed, Lily's tiny body hooked up to numerous wires and monitors. He didn't check his phone or look at his watch. He just held a worn, soft-cover children's book, a classic adventure story, and began reading. His voice, strained from years of chemical fumes and whispered grief, was filled with a deep, consuming love. Then she saw the authentic detail. Lily, though weak, was gripping a tattered children's book. Victoria's eyes focused on the dedication page. Written in faded ink, in an adult's precise hand, were the words, "Dad is always on time for you." Victoria's knees weakened. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. This man wasn't running from work. He was running to keep a promise. He was racing a clock far more terrifying than the one on the timesheet. He was fighting for his daughter's life. One chapter, one story, one clean floor at a time. The CEO, who valued time as money, suddenly realized its true heartbreaking value. The perfect machine of her company was built upon such imperfect human struggle. Victoria didn't sleep that night. The image of the janitor's tired face illuminated by the dim hospital light, his love manifest in the simple act of storytelling, was a permanent fixture in her mind. Her meticulously ordered world, where everything could be quantified, priced, and controlled, suddenly felt chaotic and hollow. The neat columns of her quarterly reports seemed meaningless compared to the single worn children's book. The first thing she did the next morning was pull Ethan's employee file. She read the clinical HR summary. Ethan Cole, widower. Dependent. Lily Cole, 9. Long-term congenital cardiac condition. No disciplinary issues. Consistently high work rating. Highly effective. The facts were stark, but the truth she witnessed was devastating. She lingered over the details of his wife's death and his subsequent injuries, realizing that the company had hired a true hero and treated him like a minor infraction. During the morning executive meeting, HR brought up the janitorial discrepancy again, citing the need for systemic consistency. "We recommend immediate disciplinary action for Janitor Cole due to repeated early departure. This sets a dangerous precedent, undermining the time clock procedure," the HR director stated, his voice flat and managerial. Victoria looked away from her perfect, polished desk. "Hold the action. Temporarily suspended," she commanded, her voice firm yet lacking its usual cold authority. She felt a profound duty to protect this man, a duty that superseded the rulebook. No one dared to question her, but the boardroom silence was thick with confusion and judgment. That evening, Victoria returned to the hospital. She wasn't wearing her usual tailored suit. She wore a simple black coat, trying to be invisible. She carried a thick, discreet envelope of cash, enough to cover several months of Lily's specialty care. She waited until Ethan had finished the chapter, kissed Lily's forehead, and pulled the blanket up. As he turned to leave, she stepped into the doorway, her heart beating a nervous rhythm she hadn't felt since her first presentation to the board. She didn't offer sympathy, she offered a transaction, attempting to maintain her corporate distance. "This is for the hospital bills." Discreetly. "No one else needs to know," she whispered, pushing the envelope towards him. It was her way of fixing the problem, of buying back his time. Ethan paused. His eyes, though weary, were clear and steady. They held no resentment, only a quiet, unshakable self-possession. He looked at the envelope, then at the CEO, and finally back at his sleeping daughter. He took a slow, deliberate breath, recognizing the sincerity, but also the inherent imbalance of the gesture. "Thank you, Ms. Hale. I appreciate the thought. I really do," he said slowly, his voice raspy. "But I want my daughter to see that her father can still provide, that he is whole enough to handle this crisis through his own labor. I need her to know I can still earn it, no matter how small the pay grade is." His quiet refusal was more impactful than any outburst or dramatic rejection. It wasn't about foolish pride, it was about the bedrock of his dignity as a provider. It was about preserving the essential, masculine image of the protector for his child, an image earned through sweat, not charity. He was defining his value not by what he was given, but by what he created. Victoria felt a peculiar sharp sting of inadequacy. She was used to people caving before her wealth and power. She was used to controlling solutions. She had offered money, her ultimate tool, and he had rejected it, not out of foolishness, but out of deeply held ethical conviction. She simply nodded, her cheeks hot with a new kind of shame, placed the envelope on the small, cluttered bedside table and left without another word, her mind reeling from the unexpected lesson. A few days later, Lily, intrigued by the powerful woman who had visited, asked her father, "Daddy, who was the quiet lady with the tired eyes?" Ethan smiled sadly, tucking her hand under the covers. "She is a good person, sweetie, who just hasn't learned yet how to help without making the recipient feel small. She has a big heart, but she uses money like a shield." Victoria somehow heard about the comment, perhaps through a nervous nurse she had cultivated, perhaps through her own desperate, covert surveillance. His simple, profound analysis of her flaw struck her deep. It resonated with a faint, painful memory that she had suppressed for years. She remembered her own father, the founder of Hale Industries, a man of rough hands and profound wisdom, who had built the company from the ground up. He used to tell her during her business school days, "If you only use your power to fix mistakes, Victoria, you'll never truly understand the quiet value of the people who create the real wealth in this company." The value wasn't just in the quarterly reports, it was in the hands that held the broom and the integrity they possessed. Victoria started actively observing Ethan, not to discipline him, but to learn from him. She began lurking in the quiet halls after hours, becoming the ghost CEO, watching the flow of the night shift. She watched as Ethan, still in his uniform, would quietly repair a colleague's broken floor buffer without being asked. She witnessed him patiently teaching a nervous young hire how to safely operate an industrial cleaning machine, his tone instructional, never condescending, sharing his deep mechanical knowledge freely. One evening, she was hidden behind a pillar, watching Ethan mentor a new discouraged intern who was lamenting his lowly cleaning job. Ethan's reply was a quiet, powerful echo. "Every job is worthwhile, son, if you do it so cleanly that you can see your own reflection in it. The quality of the work is the measure of the man, not the title on the door." Victoria froze. That was it. That was the exact phrase her father had used 15 years ago when she was starting in the mailroom. It was the unwritten code of honor that had built Hale Industries, a code she had traded for quarterly profit margins. She had become so obsessed with the reflection of success in the media that she had forgotten the reflection of integrity on the floor itself. As she stepped back, out of sight, she noticed the authentic detail Ethan carried everywhere. A worn, stubby pencil, its end chewed from years of thoughtful contemplation, was clipped securely to the pocket of his janitorial shirt. She recognized the childish, careful etching on the wood. Lily's dad. It was a birthday gift from his daughter, given the day he started his janitorial job at Hale. The pencil was his compass, reminding him that his only true title was father. This small tool, carried by a man of immense hidden dignity, was more meaningful than any executive pen Victoria owned. The CEO had been humbled, Her pursuit of a disciplinary offense had resulted in a personal, profound education. She hadn't found a fraud, she had found the last honest man in the building, and he was teaching her the meaning of true corporate responsibility. A week of tense silence broke into a maelstrom. The whispers started subtly, then roared through the corporate floors like a gale. Janitor Cole is the CEO's new lover. An anonymous post went viral on an internal company forum featuring a blurry, grainy photo of Ethan and Victoria standing in the dimly lit elevator, accompanied by the malicious caption, "From floor scrubber to boss's pet, shame on Hale Industries. He gets to leave early and she covers for him." The rumor spread like wildfire, fueled by resentment, corporate cynicism, and the deep-seated prejudice against manual labor. Employees who had long envied Ethan's efficiency suddenly found a reason to hate him. He's arrogant, leaving early, and now he's protected. The CEO is compromising the company for a fling. The narrative was simple, false, and perfectly damaging to both Victoria's authority and Ethan's reputation. The board of directors, already jittery from fluctuating energy market prices and the potential for a media scandal, called an emergency meeting. Their focus was not on the truth, but on the optics, the bottom line. The potential for a harassment lawsuit and the damage to the company's polished image were paramount. They needed a scapegoat. "Victoria, you must sign the order to terminate him immediately," the chief legal officer demanded, his voice tight with professional anxiety. "We need to cut this liability before it becomes a shareholder crisis. The optics are toxic." Victoria's jaw set. She saw the truth behind their words. They were afraid of integrity, afraid of a story they couldn't control, and most of all, afraid of anything that couldn't be quantified on a ledger. During the heated boardroom exchange, a long-standing conservative director, Mr. Sterling, leaned forward, his face etched with disapproval and corporate disdain. "Are you truly willing to trade the reputation of Hale Industries, built over 50 years, for one floor sweeper, Victoria? For one man who consistently breaks protocol and draws public scrutiny?" Victoria met his gaze, her voice low, measured, and dangerously calm. Every word was chosen for maximum impact. "If this reputation is built on the lie that a man who sacrifices sleep for his dying daughter is breaking protocol, and if we are so fragile that compassion can destroy us, then yes, Mr. Sterling, I am willing to trade it." She didn't stop there. She revealed her nightly observation, her discovery of Lily and Ethan's quiet dignity. She detailed his history as a decorated engineer and his injury and his quiet refusal of her money. She laid out the truth like a naked, embarrassing corporate failure. "We're a multi-billion-dollar company. We measure our success in energy output, but we failed to recognize the energy of a man fighting for his child. The only protocol broken here," she concluded, her voice gaining strength until it filled the room, "is our moral protocol. We are punishing a good man for being a great father, and if that's the culture we want, then I shouldn't be CEO." The move failed to impress the majority. They valued stability over morality. The stock took an immediate dip, a public validation of the board's fears. The media, having caught wind of the internal drama and Victoria's defiance, began a public onslaught, painting her as an emotional, compromised leader. Ethan, seeing the immense pressure his presence was putting on the CEO and the company he still respected, quietly drafted his resignation letter. He didn't want his battle with fate to become her battle with the board. "I cannot stand by and watch my personal circumstances inflict further damage on you or the company's stability," he wrote, his handwriting as neat and precise as his floor notes. "My duty is to my daughter, and I will not be the source of your downfall." Victoria found him by his cleaning cart, the resignation letter resting on a clean bucket. She picked it up but didn't sign it, tearing it in half instead. "You don't need to leave, Ethan, not because of the empty words of people who have never worked with their hands or heart," she said, her voice firm, the paper tearing with a sharp sound. He gave a slight, resigned shrug. "It's not the words, Ms. Hale. It's the time. Time is the only thing I can't afford to waste anymore. I need to focus on what matters most." The crisis escalated dramatically that same afternoon. Ethan was finishing his shift when the call came. The hospital called him directly. Lily had suffered a major cardiac event, a sudden and severe regression. She needed immediate, complex, high-risk surgery, a procedure that required enormous upfront funds and specialized resources. The cost was astronomical, surpassing everything Ethan had managed to save and what his insurance would cover instantly. His world instantly collapsed into silent terror. He dropped his broom, the loud clatter echoing in the empty hallway, and rushed to the hospital, his mind reeling, his focus entirely on his daughter. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his bank, haggard and defeated, ready to plead for an emergency loan, prepared to mortgage his future for his daughter's chance. He presented his meager savings and the deeds to his small apartment. The bank teller looked at the screen, then back at him with a strange, respectful look, a kindness in her eyes. "Sir, your balance. It's been paid in full." The total cost of the surgery was covered yesterday, along with a sizable trust for future care. Ethan stared blankly, the shock robbing him of breath. Who? Who did this? Was it the insurance? I haven't signed the papers. The teller tapped the keyboard, confirming the source. It was an anonymous transfer, marked only as a contribution from the Human Fund, an endowment established just yesterday by Hale Industries, signed by the CEO herself. Ethan understood immediately. Victoria had found a way to honor his dignity. It wasn't charity, it was a deeply private act of corporate redemption, a gesture that allowed him to maintain his self-respect while saving his daughter's life. He didn't say a word of thanks to the teller. He couldn't. He simply took the paid invoice, folded it carefully, and left the bank, his shoulders slightly straighter. A father granted a miracle. Later that evening, Victoria was in her penthouse office, preparing for the inevitable board vote that would strip her of her position. Her desk was covered in damage reports and legal documents, the financial fallout of her moral stand. She found the authentic detail left in the center of her desk blotter. It was a tiny, perfectly folded paper crane made from the paid hospital invoice. Written on one of the crane's delicate wings in Lily's distinct, shaky, childlike handwriting were the words, "Dad says anyone who helps and doesn't show off is a true good person." Ethan had managed to slip into her office unnoticed and left the message, a quiet, profound acceptance of her help, given on his daughter's behalf. This gesture, made not for money but for gratitude, confirmed her choice. She realized that her relationship with Ethan Cole was not a scandal. It was the test of her true character, and she had passed. She decided to fight the board, not for her job, but for the principle that created the paper crane. The emergency surgery was a success. Lily, against all odds, began a steady, miraculous recovery. She was still fragile for weeks, but the color returned to her cheeks and the sparkle to her eyes. The immediate threat was gone, replaced by a cautious, hopeful dawn. A few days post-operation, Victoria arrived at Lily's bedside carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers, not the expensive corporate roses she usually favored. This time, she didn't bring an envelope. She brought her presence. "Thank you, Ms. Hale," Ethan said, his voice thick with relief and emotion. His usual reserve momentarily shattered. He extended a tired, grateful hand. "Both my daughter and I owe you everything. You gave us time." Victoria shook her head, her gaze soft, her corporate mask finally lowered. "No, Ethan, I owe you," she corrected him gently, squeezing his hand. "I only paid back the fairness that the corporate world stole from you. I paid back the time you invested in my company, even when I failed to value it. You have always done a full shift, with your whole heart. This was simply a matter of correcting the books." The board eventually failed to remove Victoria, finding her defense, backed by the now viral story of quiet heroism and the sudden positive media cycle, too difficult to overcome. The stock stabilized, proving her point. Integrity eventually pays. A few months later, Lily was home, recovering and slowly returning to a semblance of normal life. Victoria, however, was just beginning her work. She had successfully fought off the hostile board takeover by framing the entire crisis as a necessary, moral pivot for the company. She argued that the stock dip was merely the cost of transitioning from a financially successful company to a morally sustainable one. Her bold move, backed by the heart-wrenching story of the janitor father, garnered massive positive public attention and a new, fiercely loyal customer base. Her first major internal move was the creation of Project Light, a comprehensive corporate social responsibility program. Project Light wasn't a marketing gimmick. It was a deeply funded initiative, managed not by the HR or marketing departments, but by a new internal ethics committee. It was designed to support employees facing sudden, catastrophic personal crises and to establish long-term care programs or for children in local hospitals, starting with St. Jude's. Victoria immediately invited Ethan to lead the Human Resources Maintenance Advisory Board, a high-level role to consult on staffing needs, safety protocols, and more importantly, act as the project's humanitarian consultant, a title she invented specifically for him. Ethan, true to his character, declined the executive title. "I appreciate the offer, Mrs. Hale," he said with deep respect, "but I want to keep cleaning the floors. I want to keep this place as clean as you're trying to make it for everyone else. I am more valuable to you as a reminder of where the real strength of the company lies. I can't advise on the value of labor if I stop doing it." Victoria accepted his refusal gracefully, her understanding complete. She realized the floor was his sanctuary, his quiet place of duty and meditation. But she made a simple, non-negotiable stipulation. From then on, his work hours would officially be 12 a.m. morning to 8 p.m., with no loss of pay, and his salary was quietly raised to that of an advisory board member. He would not be cheating the clock. The clock would finally reflect his reality and his enormous value to the company's culture. Every evening, Victoria made a point of stopping by the office to talk to Ethan and Lily, who would often join him for a few minutes before his shift started. The conversations were simple, human, and grounding for the CEO. They rarely talked about business, focusing instead on Lily's latest book or Ethan's next project. During the grand dedication ceremony for the new Project Light headquarters, Victoria stood before a packed audience of employees, shareholders, and press. She bypassed the standard corporate speech, her voice catching slightly. "The person who taught me the true meaning of responsibility wasn't a business leader or a professor or a consultant," she stated, her eyes searching the crowd until they found Ethan, standing quietly in the back, leaning against a clean wall. "It was an ordinary father who showed me that the greatest power we possess is the kindness we extend in silence, and that a true full shift is measured by heart, not by hours." The hall fell silent, then erupted in thunderous applause that lasted over a minute. The authentic detail was revealed at the entrance of Project Light. A simple yet elegant bronze plaque was mounted. "Project Light, where responsibility meets kindness." The words were a direct tribute to Ethan's philosophy and Victoria's newfound purpose. The janitor had not just cleaned the floors of Hale Industries, he had restored its ethical foundation. 1 year passed. The transformation within Hale Industries was complete, running deeper than any policy change. The culture was noticeably softer, more empathetic. Lily, fully recovered and thriving, was awarded a prestigious medical scholarship, her lifelong journey through illness inspiring her to pursue a career in pediatric cardiology, specializing in the field that saved her. Ethan Cole was still working at Hale Industries. He still wore the janitor uniform, which now felt less like a costume and more like a uniform of honor. He ran weekly evening workshops for young staff, sharing his engineering and maintenance knowledge, teaching them practical skills and, more importantly, the dignity of labor, all under the umbrella of Project Light. Victoria was a different CEO. Her demeanor was less frigid, her decisions guided by a visible layer of compassion that hadn't dulled her business acumen, but sharpened her priorities. She established the Lilly Grant, a fully endowed scholarship fund for the children of all Hale Industries support staff, ensuring that no family would ever have to choose between medical care and tuition again. During the Lilly Grant presentation ceremony, Ethan was asked to speak, not as an executive, but as a father and an employee, the moral center of the company. His words were simple, resonating with profound truth. "Responsibility isn't about the title you hold," he said, his voice now strong and clear, resonating with earned wisdom. It's about doing your part with excellence so that others may fall less and rise higher. My job is to clean the floors, and your job, Ms. Hale, is to clean the corporate conscience. We both have important work. When the stage lights dimmed and the final guest departed, Ethan, true to form, stayed behind. He began quietly sweeping up the inevitable celebratory debris, the fallen confetti, the discarded cups, a kaleidoscope of joy that now covered the polished floor. Victoria watched him, a familiar, affectionate question on her lips. She no longer felt the need to apologize for her presence. "Still no plans to retire the broom, Ethan?" she asked, using his name easily now. He stopped sweeping, leaning against the sturdy wooden handle, a faint, contented smile crossing his face. "If I stop sweeping, Amelia, someone might slip and fall," he replied, referencing his new title and his unshakable commitment to service. "And I can't risk anyone falling behind now that we've started this journey." She laughed softly, a genuine sound of deep understanding. She approached his desk and noticed the authentic detail. A second, smaller paper crane, perfectly folded, even more intricate than the first, had appeared. This one placed next to the original. Written on its wing was a new, powerful message, scrawled in an adult's steady hand, a response to his words, "Where kindness keeps the lights on." She picked it up, the delicate paper feeling weighty in her hand, a symbol of their shared silent pact. She looked at him, then at her own reflection in the spotless floor, a floor cleaned by a man whose integrity was unshakable. For the first time, Victoria Hale felt that her company truly belonged to people, not to assets, not to shareholders, but to the quiet, determined hearts that kept its foundation clean. She had finally understood that a CEO's ultimate responsibility is to the human stories beneath the surface, ensuring that no one is ever racing time alone. If you believe that silent kindness and the profound dignity of a loving father can still keep the light on in this world, leave a comment and subscribe to Hidden Heart Stories. We tell the tales of heroes who should not be forgotten, the ones who teach us the true meaning of a full shift.